uncertainty. Markets don't like uncertainty. Markets like actually totalitarian governments where you have a understanding of what's out there, and obviously the whole dimension is changing now with, as you said, a democratization of countries, and democracies are very messy, as we know in the United States. You have opinions changing back and forth.
Yep. Of course, leave it to Larry Fink to espouse totalitarianism. What do you expect? Welcome, guys. Thanks for stopping in today. In this episode, we're going to look into Blackrock, ESG, the Great Reset, how the narrative is crumbling, and how Bitcoin is winning. So let's get into it, shall we? Now, we already know, after years of slander, Blackrock is getting into Bitcoin. However, while Blackrock may pump our Bitcoiner bags, it is vital to remain vigilant and remember that the powerful Blackrock, with $10 trillion of assets under management, remains one of the biggest climate agenda shills on the planet.
And now related to Bitcoin, one of my important investors was on one of the television shows the last few days, and he spoke about Bitcoin and two of, one, monetary policy, two, and three, COVID. The hits on BlackRock's on our website was 3,000 on COVID, 3,000 hits on a monetary policy, and 600,000 hits on Bitcoin. So what that tells you is Bitcoin has caught the attention and the imagination of many people. Many people are fascinated about it. Many people are excited about it, but it's still untested. It's still a pretty small market relative to other markets. It can be, we see these big giant movements every day. It's a thin market. And so can it evolve into a global market? Possibly. Certainly by evidence of the imagination of so many who want to learn about it or interested in about it, to me is a very telling sign. Another good example why understanding big data, like how many hits and all that, really is a defining statement. And so we look at it as something that is real, but it's still untested. It still has many. We have to go through many markets to see if it's going to be permanently real, or it's going to be a variant of that sometime in the future.
Now, environmental social governance, ESG, has been working its way into investing guidelines for some years under the leadership of BlackRock's CEO and Board of Trustees member at the World Economic Forum, Larry Fink. Oh, don't believe me? Well, let's have a look-see. What is ESG? Of course, it's a scam, but it's also a term that encompasses several different concepts: climate change, sustainability, green technology, and social justice issues, such as workers' rights, working conditions, shifting societal norms, and exploitation of minorities, for example. It is possible that the ESG ranking of a company or investor will be the determining factor in whether the company or investor will receive investment. It should not come as a surprise. The concepts of ESG integrate the objectives of the business with those of the state, rather than concentrating just on the interests of the firm and its shareholders. Sovereign governments, corporations, international organizations, and big tech in bed together sounds a lot like economic fascism.
They are coming from a belief system that says that nation state is an obsolete idea, and we have to have a one world government that is basically a fusion of the interests of corporations and politics, global politics. And we got to start by finding out who they are, voting them out of office, making sure they are not part of our governments. Two notable characters here in the United States are Governors Inslee and Newsom. Okay? We've got to out these people. We've got to force them to account for whether or not they're Americans or are they globalists. And if they're globalists, they got to get out. We got to get rid of them. We got to take back ownership of our country. If you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in the principles of free speech and personal autonomy, medical autonomy, and autonomy at every level, other level, it's time to fight. Or your children are going to live in basically a techno-fascism for the rest of their natural lives as serfs.
When one gets in bed with the government, one must expect the disease it spreads. That from the great Dr. Ron Paul. Now let's really get into Blackrock, ESG, and the Great Reset. In June of 2020, elites gathered together to talk about a plan that they ominously referred to as the Great Reset. Let's take a closer look into exactly what they said. To achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. Responding to the COVID-19 pandemic requires global cooperation among governments, international organizations, and the business community, and it will demand private sector engagement every step of the way. The Great Reset agenda will have three main components. The first would steer the market toward fairer outcomes. Moreover, governments should implement long overdue reforms that promote more equitable outcomes. We must build entirely new foundations for our economies and economic systems. The level of cooperation and ambition this implies is unprecedented, but it is not some impossible dream. In fact, one silver lining of the pandemic is that it has shown how quickly we can make radical changes to our lifestyles. Almost instantly, the crisis forced businesses and individuals to abandon practices long claimed to be essential, from frequent air travel to working in an office. Likewise, populations have overwhelmingly shown a willingness to make sacrifices for the sake of healthcare and other essential workers in vulnerable populations. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance ESG metrics. Now, at their gathering in June, many influential international leaders and organizations, as well as the WEF, considered essential ringleader of the Great Reset, expressed their commitment to supporting the agenda. This gathering in D.C. went on for a total of 3 days. Members of the climate cabal repeatedly stated that climate change served as the long-term justification that would allow for a sustained massive transformation of society. The pandemic caused by COVID-19 served as the initial justification for the Great Reset.
Now, when we look at COVID, I think we should distinguish between three phases. We have the three R's: restrain, which means to fight the virus, the hot phase. Most countries are in today. Then we have recover, to go back to a kind of new normal. And finally, the reset, which means to define and to design the strategies which should lead us in the after-corona phase. What is the objective? What kind of world do we want to build? What do we know? What did we learn? I think the world which we want to create with the Great Reset has to be much more resilient. It has to be, because security, people will demand more security, physical security, health security. It will have to be more inclusive. We had already a big gap before the crisis started. This gap will be tremendously increased. So if we want to avoid some kind of social revolutions, and we have seen the signs of anger on the streets already the last weeks. So we have to address this issue to create a stronger inclusiveness. And finally, more sustainable, because we know now that the next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
They stated that if there were no urgent action, it would put the human race in danger of an existential threat. This argument pushes this to make people fearful and accept the move towards a system of control. Along with Blackrock, influential members of the Great Reset movement are the CEOs of substantial financial corporations and firms such as Bank of America and MasterCard. Great Reset disciples have called for significant increases in government welfare programs such as job guarantees and health care provided by the government, among other things. things, ESG metrics are at the core of the Great Reset. How environmentally conscious is the company? Do they have the correct proportion of people from minority groups? Or, shame, is the business involved in politically disfavored businesses, such as gun manufacture, production and sales, natural gas, Bitcoin mining, amongst other industries? The plans to restructure the world that are part of the Great Reset contain some essential components. The utilization of ESG techniques and systems, the encouragement of sustainable practices regarding investments, and the obligation placed on nations to adopt green forms of energy production. In order to fulfill their objectives, they intend to exercise control over every aspect of human existence, no matter where on the planet people are. They define themselves as globalists. As a crucial enabling tool, they wish to establish global electronic money that permits surveillance of every transaction.
We know that the Reserve Bank of Australia has been working on this for many years. So they get a digital currency in place. That's ultimately where they want to go. And then the shopping and spending preferences, they'll know all of this. Who you associate with, judging whether your choices are in compliance with the government's wishes, whether they're so-called green, social security, veteran services, travel and movement records, whether you will be allowed to travel, whether you have access to travel, surveillance, website viewing. They'll track what websites you're going to, employment status, wealth measurement, that's bank records, social media comments. Everything you do will be recorded and converted into digital form and then used against you to control you. And that's what they really want. They want control. All of this is about control. And it started with the COVID measures, Maria. We saw those. They were despicable. And by the way, the World Economic Forum is the source of our digital identity bill. Parts of our digital identity bill were copied and pasted from World Economic Forum's digital platform policy, I think it's called, digital project. And I just asked for an update from one of my staff, and he said that the same bill, or virtually identical bill, has been rolled out in other countries around the world. New Zealand, Canada, Britain, Singapore, Thailand. That's where bills are before the Parliament right now. The EU, European Union, has a bill for the whole of the European Union. Malaysia has it in place, passed already. It's already at 64% uptake. So it'll be needed once they get 100% uptake or very close to 100% uptake, then they will just make it compulsory for anything to do with the government or banking. In the Philippines, it's similar. And in Indonesia, it's across government only, not banking yet. So they're moving this out throughout Asia and throughout the European Union and through Canada in North America.
These new green plotters desire a complete overhaul of global governance with themselves at the helm. The World Economic Forum is orchestrating methodically what it calls the Great Reset. They are so sure of the success of their initiatives that they promise that by 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. The World Economic Forum openly promotes the notion that they would undermine enterprises, governments, banking institutions, royal families, mainstream media, university institutions, massive religions, and young global leaders.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now. Mm-hmm. I'm with the president, who is a young global leader, but
it is, interesting to note some of the members and their propensity for totalitarianism. Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, for example.
The most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear, covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. We will provide information frequently. We will share everything we can, everything else you see, a grain of salt. And so I really ask people to focus on
that. The most egregious example of that appears to be this text which originated in Malaysia and has become a viral hoax in Australia and in New Zealand. How irresponsible is it the people that are sharing that news of a lockdown imminent in New Zealand?
Yeah, and look, that's the kind of thing that adds to the anxiety that people feel. So I continue to share the message. New Zealanders must prepare, but do not panic. Prepare. And when you see those messages, remember that unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. And I really ask people, just visit covid19.govt.nz. It has all of the up-to-date information, and we will continue to provide everything you need to know.
Additionally, the World Economic Forum lists Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as the agenda author.
I want to make something very clear. The illegal blockades seeking to take our neighborhoods and our economy hostage, and the collective COVID fatigue we are facing are two very separate things. If you joined the protests because you're tired of COVID, you now need to understand that you are breaking laws. The consequences are becoming more and more severe. You don't want to end up losing your license, end up with a criminal record, which will impact your job, your livelihood, even your ability to travel internationally, including to the US. We've heard your frustration with COVID, with the measures that are there to keep people safe. We've heard you. It's time to go home now.
But the states are fighting back. States are taking on Blackrock and those that aim to dictate economic and social matters under the guise of ESG. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis banned state pension funds from participating in ESG investments. Blackrock was listed as a firm which the state of West Virginia will not be doing business with due to their climate agenda. Fink and his associates made it clear that they would attempt to coerce corporations to follow their aims in decarbonization initiatives, the ones causing chaos all around the world.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at Blackrock, we are forcing behaviors.
Many state attorney generals have written a letter to Fink recently responding to statements from Mark McComb, Black Chief Client Officer. From Lynn Fitch, I was proud to join 18 of my fellow attorney generals this week in demanding answers from Blackrock. It is unacceptable to risk retirees' futures over their political agenda. To read the letter, click here. Our states will not idly stand for our pensioners' retirements to be sacrificed for Blackrock's climate agenda. The time has come for Blackrock to come clean and whether it actually values our state's most valuable stakeholders, our current and future retirees. Mr. McComb posited that Blackrock is agnostic on the question of energy and merely offers investing clients a range of investment options in the energy sector, but this claimed neutrality differs considerably from Blackrock's public comments, which indicate that Blackrock has already committed to accelerate net zero emissions across all of its assets, regardless of client wishes. To send the point home, the attorney generals used Blackrock's own words against them. Blackrock has committed to implement a stewardship and engagement strategy with a clear escalation and voting policy that is consistent with our ambition for all assets under management to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. Using $10 trillion of assets under management for personal and political purposes is technically a violation of Blackrock's transparency and fiduciary obligations, as Fink implied when he said the firm was not breaking them since it offered investors other choices. However, if Fink disregarded the consequences of investors' choices and considered all the funds as if invested in politically motivated investment entities, that choice is culpable and irresponsible. All right, let's take a look at some of the recent clapback against Blackrock, ESG, and the Great Reset. This from Rasmussen Reports. Vanguard, world's largest mutual fund, quits net zero climate change initiative, citing need for independence. Meanwhile, today in other ESG-related news, Blackrock CEO Larry Fink pushed to exit over ESG hypocrisy. Then from October 18th, Missouri pulled $500 million in state pension funds from financial institution Blackrock over the company's environmental and social priorities. Quote, Blackrock prioritizes its woke political agenda above financial interests of consumers. That from the Missouri State Treasury. And as the globalist narrative collapses, Bitcoin and freedom rise in its place. That'll bring us to a wrap. Thanks to everyone again. Share us, give us a pump, and tune in to Simply Bitcoin TV for the best in Bitcoin news Monday through Friday, day after day, baby. We're slinging it up. Thanks for stopping in today. Until next time, peace.